An entitled mother demanded my laptop for her kid, then got legally dismantled on camera. I was sitting in a crowded cafe finishing a design project on my $4,000 MacBook. A woman, let us call her Sandra, approached my table with a young boy. She did not say hello. Instead, she pointed at my computer and told me her son needed a laptop for his birthday. She said that since I looked like I had plenty of money, I should do a good deed and give it to him for free. I laughed, assuming it was a prank, and told her no. Sandra immediately turned bright red and slammed her fist onto my table. She shouted that I was being a selfish brat and that her son was a straight-A student who deserved a reward more than a spoiled freelancer. She actually reached out and tried to pull the laptop towards her. When I gripped the edges to pull it back, she noticed the finish. She screamed that it was silver and her son specifically wanted a black one. She called me a pathetic loser for owning the wrong color, and then she intentionally swiped my hot coffee directly onto the keyboard. As I scrambled to save my work, she tried to shove the device off the table. Before she could run, a man at the corner table stood up. He had a high-end 4K camera rig pointed directly at our table. It was a famous legal YouTuber with millions of subscribers who was filming a live segment. He looked Sandra in the eye and told her he caught the entire assault and attempted theft on a crystal-clear feed. The police arrived within minutes. Because the footage was already backed up to a cloud server, Sandra could not lie. She was arrested for felony grand theft and criminal mischief. The YouTuber posted the raw footage that night and it gathered 30 million views. Sandra was fired from her corporate job the next morning. I filed a civil lawsuit and won a judgment for the laptop and my lost wages. She had to liquidate her savings to pay me. My boss told me to quit if I hated his ego, so I let him build a $5 million mistake. I was the lead designer for a boutique firm run by a man named Gavin. Gavin spent more time at the golf course than the office, yet he took credit for every blueprint I drew. When I asked for a partnership stake after bringing in our 3 largest accounts, he laughed in my face. He told me that I was a replaceable tool and said, "If you do not like it, leave," so I did. What Gavin forgot was that my contract did not have a non-compete clause, because he was too cheap to pay a professional lawyer to draft a proper agreement. I walked out that afternoon and every single major client followed me within 48 hours. Gavin was furious. He decided to get revenge by building a massive 3-story luxury showroom directly across the street from my new office just to spite me. He wanted to look down on my business literally and figuratively. He poured his entire life savings and a massive bank loan into this project. He bragged on social media about how his new building would make my firm look like a shack. I stayed silent. I watched from my window as the foundation was poured and the steel beams went up. I knew something Gavin did not. The plot of land he bought contained a protected underground drainage easement for the entire city block. I waited until the roof was finished and Gavin held a grand opening ceremony. Only then did I send an anonymous tip to the city building inspector with the original land surveys Gavin had ignored. 2 days later, the city issued a permanent stop work order. Because he built directly over a primary municipal artery, the structure was deemed a public safety hazard. The court ruled it could not be retrofitted. Gavin was legally ordered to demolish the entire building at his own expense. He lost his savings, his firm, and his dignity. Now, the lot across from me is just a flat pile of dirt, and Gavin is working as a junior drafter for a firm 2 cities away. My boss fired me and tried to sue me over a fence, so I had the city seize his entire house. I was the only person managing the servers at a logistics firm. My boss, Mr. Henderson, decided I was a luxury he could no longer afford. On Friday at 4 p.m., he fired me, claiming the systems ran themselves. Henderson was also my neighbor, and he spent the entire weekend screaming about the cedar fence I had just installed. He called it an illegal eyesore and threatened to spend every penny he had to make me tear it down. On Saturday morning, the entire company database crashed. Henderson called me 10 times, demanding I fix it for free because it happened on my watch. I told him I no longer had access and my hourly consulting rate was $500. He laughed and told me he would rather sue me for the fence than pay me a dime. He promised to ruin my life by Monday morning. I decided to strike first. I called the city planning department to request an official survey and permit verification for my fence. When the inspector arrived on Monday, he spent hours measuring the property line. He confirmed my fence was perfectly legal, but the survey revealed something catastrophic for Henderson. Henderson had built a massive sunroom 3 years earlier without any permits. Worse, the survey proved that 60% of his house was sitting directly on protected federal wetlands. The city inspector flagged the property immediately. Because it was on protected land, he could not get retroactive permits. The city issued a mandatory demolition order for the unpermitted structures, and the federal government stepped in with massive environmental fines. Henderson lost his company because the servers stayed down for a week, and then he lost his home. He is currently living in a trailer while the bank forecloses on a pile of dirt he can never build on again. My boss fired me to save $500, so I billed his company $50,000. I was the only IT professional at a logistics firm handling millions in shipping. On Friday afternoon, my manager, let us call him Gary, called me into his office. Gary is the type of man who thinks he is the smartest person in any room because he wears expensive shoes and speaks over everyone. He told me the company was restructuring and my salary was a luxury they could no longer afford. Specifically mentioned that by firing me on Friday afternoon, they would avoid paying out my $500 quarterly performance bonus. I reminded him that we had a massive server migration scheduled for Saturday morning. Gary laughed and said, "How hard can it be to watch a progress bar? I will do it myself." I packed my things and left. Saturday morning at 8 a.m., my phone started exploding with calls from Gary. I ignored the first 10 calls. When I finally answered, he was screaming. The entire system had crashed, 3 warehouses were at a total standstill, and they were losing $10,000 every hour. Gary told me to get in there and fix it immediately. I told him I was no longer an employee and my weekend consulting rate was $500 an hour. Gary tried to scam me. He said he would only hire me if I signed a document admitting the crash was my fault so he could sue me for damages later. I told him I would only work if he signed my specific emergency consulting contract first. Gary was so panicked by the mounting losses that he signed it within 30 seconds without reading a single word. He thought he was agreeing to a simple $500 fee. In reality, he signed an emergency restoration agreement with a $50,000 immediate mobilization penalty and a non-disparagement clause. I went in, typed 3 commands to fix his mistake, and left within 20 minutes. On Monday, the owners saw the invoice. Gary tried to claim I cheated him, but the digital audit trail proved he signed it from his office computer. They fired Gary for gross negligence and paid my invoice in full to avoid a massive lawsuit. My $500 bonus cost them $50,000. A customer tried to scam me for $500, so I made her owe $50,000. I was working the express lane at a high-end grocery store when a woman, let us call her Sandra, piled 2 carts full of steak and wine onto my belt. I was exhausted after a 10-hour shift and focused on scanning items quickly. Sandra slammed her hand down on the scanner and demanded I stop. She claimed my lack of a smile was a violation of the store hospitality policy and that her entire $500 order should be free. I told her I could not do that. Sandra began screaming that I was assaulting her with my attitude. He demanded to see the store manager, Mr. Miller. When he arrived, Sandra told him she would report the store to the corporate office for emotional distress unless he signed a waiver giving her the groceries for free. Mr. Miller looked ready to cave just to make her stop shouting. I stepped in and told Sandra that we had a specific customer satisfaction release form for these exact disputes. I went to the back office and printed a document I had drafted for my business law class. It looked official with the store logo at the top. I told Sandra that if she signed it, we would let her walk out with the $500 in groceries today. Sandra smirked at me, called me a pathetic loser, and signed the bottom without reading a single word. He grabbed her bags and marched out like she had won the lottery. What Sandra did not realize was that the document was a legally binding confession of attempted retail fraud and a private settlement agreement. By signing, she acknowledged she was trying to steal the groceries and agreed to pay the store $50,000 in liquidated damages to avoid a criminal referral and a civil lawsuit. Our store owner is a retired lawyer who hates entitled shoppers. He took the signed document and Sandra's license plate number straight to his legal team. Last week, Sandra received a formal summons. She's now facing total financial ruin and is begging the store for a payment plan. My doctor ignored my ruptured organ and called me crazy, so I bought his debt and ruined his life. Dr. Miller leaned back and laughed when I told him the pain in my side felt like a hot iron. "It's just anxiety, Mr. Vance," he said without looking up from his tablet. I had lost 20 pounds in a month and could barely walk. He told me to stop wasting his time with Google diagnoses and suggested I go to therapy for my health fixation. 3 days later, I collapsed in the grocery store. It was a ruptured gallbladder and a massive internal infection that nearly killed me. During my 2-month recovery, my grandfather passed away and left me his entire estate. This included a majority stake in the healthcare group that owned Miller's hospital. I joined the board of directors and immediately pulled Miller's personnel file. He was a liability waiting to happen. He had 3 secret malpractice settlements and a massive personal debt tied to his private clinic building. I did not just want him fired from the hospital. I wanted his entire life dismantled. I had my investment lawyers quietly buy the distressed mortgage on his office building and the high-interest loans he used to fund his lifestyle. Last Tuesday, I summoned Miller to a board meeting to discuss his plummeting patient satisfaction scores. He walked in with that same smug, arrogant grin. "You again?" He sneered at me from across the mahogany table. I did not say a word. I simply slid a legal folder toward him. I told him that as the new owner of his private debt and his primary landlord, I was foreclosing on his practice and seizing his equipment immediately. His face turned gray as he realized I held his entire financial existence in my hands. I told him he had exactly 60 minutes to clear his desk before the locks were changed. He tried to beg for mercy, but I reminded him that his chest pain was likely just anxiety and he should see a specialist. Miller lost his license, his clinic, and his home. He will be paying me interest for the next 20 years.